Hello and welcome to CX Today. My name is Charlie and today I'm joined by 5 excellent customer experience analysts to run through all the latest news from the space. Yes, today I'm once again delighted to be joined by Liz Miller, VP and Principal Analyst at Constellation Research, Martin Schneider, who is also now a VP and Principal Analyst at Constellation Research. Congrats for that, Martin. Rebecca Wettemann, CEO and Principal Analyst at Valoir, Simon Harrison, founder and CEO of Actionary, and Finbar Begley, a senior research analyst at Cavell Group. Now, it's great to have you all join me, and let's get right into the news because there's a lot to cover today. And let's maybe start with the news that Google has pulled out of its bid to buy HubSpot, and the tech giant will now pursue the cybersecurity firm Wiz. Now, I've spoken to Liz and Rebecca a bit about this before, and they were kind of skeptical of this ever happening in the first place. So I don't know. So, Martin, I don't know if you maybe felt similar, and were you maybe surprised by this news?
Yeah, I didn't think it was going to happen. I don't think anyone really thought it was actually going to happen. It doesn't. Google's track record with application software is questionable, I think is the most diplomatic way. So I think, in the end, it's pretty, when you're a customer using something like HubSpot, and if you're using it significantly, you're kind of probably breathing a sigh of relief. It's almost like worse going into something like a Google might be worse than like a private equity buyout. It's like, in terms of what's going to actually happen, where's the roadmap going to go? How's my customer support going to be? It's just, I think there would have been too many questions that I think really weren't ideal for HubSpot customers. There were some interesting synergies, I think, on the AI front of what Google could bring to the table to really bring some intelligence and contextual intelligence into some things, a little bit more interesting stuff on ad tech for the front end of marketing. But other than that, I was not a match made in heaven, clearly. So I think bullet dodged, I think, for a lot of people.
Yeah, I mean, bless their hearts, but Google doesn't have the DNA or the attention span to be a business applications company. They're much better off sinking more into a technology play.
And Google's an advertising company. Like I know that we all really love to kind of lean into the Google Cloudness of it all. They're an advertising company. Like that's like let's just be honest about where their revenue is for a second. And and regulators, like if we step outside of our tech bubble, regulators were going to look at this and like you could hear the knives sharpening in the background the more this conversation kept happening. Because, and I've said it before, if regulators in Europe thought Photoshop and Figma were direct competitors, what in the world was going to happen with Google and HubSpot? Like this was never going to go anywhere. It was going to cost HubSpot a ton of money. And I think that is the thing to like, Google was going to look at this and be like, experiment. Oh, well, it was going to cost HubSpot. It was going to cost HubSpot's customers. It was going to cost their legal team. There was going to be a lot of downside. And I think when you get two parties together around that table and some of those questions started bubbling up, it is not a surprise that even before discovery, this conversation fell apart. I think the interesting thing about all of this, though, is that HubSpot really, yes, took a little financial hit, right? Everyone was like, oh my God, it must be toxic. That will recover. But what it sure did was get a lot of people to look back at HubSpot and go, why is Google so interested in HubSpot in a time when all of these kind of multi-cloud platforms are starting to feel a little stale, starting to feel a little commoditized. They've leaned a little too far into AI is going to save us all. All of a sudden, here was HubSpot, and it was getting billion-dollar attention from the likes of Google. I mean, listen, if I'm over there, I'm playing that up like nobody's business.
I mean, the reality is when it comes to Microsoft's, Salesforce, these guys are selling cloud compute ultimately, and you could argue that Google has a weakness when it comes to not having a CRM as part of that arsenal to support trying to sell cloud. So it kind of made some sense, but it's interesting to see how, that's just not enough, really. And I'm obviously not behind the curtain. I'm not quite sure why it fell apart, but there's some. I wouldn't be surprised if they went looking for something else. I don't know if you guys feel that's an odd maneuver, but it doesn't sound entirely crazy given how they're, how it supports selling cloud ultimately.
I think looking towards security, like if you've got a money tree out back, and you've also got a lighter, and you want to light some of that money on fire, and you want to go out and buy an acquisition, because for Google right now, money is cheaper than money is for a lot of other people, which is great. It's great for Google's footprint. A security organization makes a lot more sense, especially from we really are making a go as being a cloud player. I mean, today in the news that is going to come out for the rest of, over this weekend, with major security, hiccups and flaws. It's not a breach, but, we didn't renew our cert, like whatever it's going to be, is certainly going to be just another reminder that security, whatever posture you're taking, a proactive or reactive resilience posture, security is the linchpin for experience in cloud, period. So Google going into that play makes a heck of a lot of sense, right? Because now you're talking about, how do you secure the core of what AI needs to be? You've got to start securing cloud, data, applications, everything from the start. Have that resilience, have that observability, have that visibility layer available in there. And yeah, put a lot of AI on top of that, right? So I think that where they're going to focus their attention makes a heck of a lot more sense than trying to control both the inbound and the outbound motion of any type of customer relationship.
Yeah, and I think you're right, Liz. I mean, it makes so much more sense, like what Wiz brings to the table for them, especially how they go to business with cloud, because they're not like Azure, and they're not like, to some sense, they're more like an AWS, right? They're more alike when you look at like what Oracle Cloud, what Azure, these are guys that are essentially, for the most part, things are running that people have already built Knox and socks against, whereas like Google and AWS are a little more Wild West in how people build on that cloud, and having like security as a service a little bit, and being able to have that as part of the layer of what you're building a little bit more kind of tied up a bit is a better move than them trying to figure out application software and not really doing it well ever. So yeah, I think it makes a lot. I think it's definitely like creates a nice layer for them. Yeah, I mean they don't understand the distribution, their partners and VAR, and so like they don't. There's no Google SIs that think about like CRM, right? Because they haven't had to. So it's an interesting thing,
I think it was also interesting recently, actually, how I think some of Google's team released a 14-page PDF document highlighting the security errors within the Microsoft ecosystem too. So it's clearly a space where they're looking to make a play into. That was quite funny to watch. But anyway, moving on. There's many more topics to talk about, and one of them is the announcement recently of Salesforce Einstein agent. I know, Rebecca, you were very much on top of this one. Can you maybe briefly tell us about what this is and why it's important?
Yeah, so this is really the shift from humans in the loop to humans at the helm, which means that Salesforce is signaling at least that it's confident enough in its AI and what it's been able to do that it can make these agents autonomous. So meaning the entire customer interaction will be handled by a bot that is relying not on branches or trees, but on actually putting Gen AI directly at the knowledge base and unified knowledge to deliver those responses to the customer. Now, I think that's great. I think what we've heard from customers is, well, Salesforce may be ready and feel confident doing that. A lot more customers are going to want to work with this with Agent Assist first to make sure that they don't run into issues that are going to turn into a, was it Air Canada situation? Where the bot is delivering information or advice to a customer that's incorrect or damaging or toxic. So great that Salesforce is out there feeling confident about what they're doing. Customers, not quite there yet. They're going to spend a little bit more time using this exact same technology that is assisting agents today to make sure that it's ready for prime time before it goes customer facing.
Yeah, there are kind of interesting test loops that you can do. But what's interesting to me is from just the overarching Einstein Copilot, Salesforce and others perspective is it's always kind of funny how they'll put this stuff out there in the support center first for a number of reasons. One is we still look at the support center as a cost center, and we're always trying to drive cost out of it. And this is one way to automate sometimes more humans out of it, which are expensive. But it's always funny how, like, they're willing to automate 100% on the AI and other processes with the customer first instead of in the marketing department or in the sales department, where they think that's way more important because obviously that's way more like actual revenue generating versus, well, they're already our customer, right? What's the worst that could happen? And it's like the worst can happen, right? And it's always just strange how they go in that way, because that's always like, this is where we can play a little bit, because at least they're already customers, and then a human can jump in and like salvage it. Whereas if you're in a lead to opportunity cycle and you're allowing AI to do all that, and toxicity and hallucinations and just bad stuff happens, you kind of blow the deal a bit, right? So it's interesting to see how this is the first like fully automated loop use case is coming into the support centers, rather than sales, marketing, and other what I would call kind of pre-sales motions. So just an interesting note, right? Once again, we completely downplay the customer relationship. Once the customer is a customer, we don't think of the importance of those engagements and how to really super protect that relationship. We just say, just throw some AI on it, it'll be fine. So it's kind of interesting to see that this is where we're seeing those first ones.
Don't you think part of that is that the data is so much better from a customer service perspective than say sales perspective? I mean, I've got so much more grounding that I can do with customer service data than I do with necessarily sales data.
1,000%. Yeah. There's definitely a technical defense, right? But at the same time, where I'm looking at, because you could also make that argument around, like, when I'm finally ready to engage, I probably have a lot of first and third party and collected data. And now more and more in our retention economy, we should know our customers well enough that when they're actually coming to our website again, we know, are they a customer? Have they been here before? What have they bought? Who are they? What might they want? Where's the cross-sell? Yeah.
We've also, I think there's a moment of kind of reality check that we also need to have. We've been doing bots, and we've been in this sandbox of AI and bots, especially in the contact center and in any digital customer service environment, for a long time now. Like, these are not new. Like, no one's waking up. No one woke up the morning after the announcement and was like, oh, I can put a bot in the contact center? This is amazing. I think what Salesforce addressed was an important thing to address, right? And I think it's that the autonomous nature of this bot isn't necessarily in its capacity to have an autonomous conversation with a customer. It's about the setup. It's about the hard sausage making that goes on, and that has really been the barrier to entry to a lot of customers, right? A lot of customers that I talk to, the reason why they're not expanding beyond the 1Z, 2Z experiment of that bot that they've had in the contact center or in the service environment for the last 5 years is because they've realized conversation is hard. Having bi-directional conversation is insanely complex. And implementing an LLM isn't like splashing glitter over something and then hoping to God it sticks. I mean, these are really, really hard things to do and to do well. And to Rebecca's point, when you assume that it was easy to do, you get bereavement fairs and customers who are lied to. And yes, a couple $1,000s that you had to pay the customer, it's not a big deal, blah, blah, blah. All those arguments are true. But you end up with a headline that lasts in our collective minds enough that we all bring it up, right? Like every analyst brings up the Air Canada story. So, I mean, the reality here is that what Salesforce has addressed isn't the difficult nature of truly delivering a great customer experience in the contact center. It's actually about the contact center and IT being able to set this up and actually get going. Like, we've got too many people stuck in the idea of loving AI, but not actually deploying it in any way that's making a difference to their business. We're still in experiment phase, even though everyone would love for us to believe that we're fully deploying.
I think the thing that's important about this is it's following on the coattails of what Microsoft have done with Copilot. The theme of the Einstein announcement was it's more about a Copilot type AI solution as well, right? I mean, it's about building ways for the workflows to be more intelligent, orchestrating engagements, and as you say, Liz, setting up for the way that you work, the way that you engage with customers holistically. And I think that's what we're going to see more of. We're going to see more of this Copilot word, it being that thing that feels a little more safe, perhaps a bit more demonstrable in terms of practical applications over just another bot that you stick in front of your customers and ultimately tend to just upset them with. So it feels like it's the more sensible path to follow when it comes to realizing the power of AI. Is this, how can I do within my applications in an intelligent way, an automated way, what people are seeing the value of the likes of ChatGPT and and the various large language model, generative AI.
It does set up the war, though, doesn't it?
It's interesting, isn't it?
I mean, it sets up the battle lines pretty clearly, which Simon, I think you're totally right. I love that you brought it up, right? Is because you have Microsoft with this full court press on Copilots, right? And the Copilot mantra when it comes to Microsoft is AI and these recommendations and this intelligence should appear and should help you, the employee, where you want to work. You work in Dynamics all day? Great, you got a Copilot for that. You work in Outlook all day, seller? Great, you got something for that. Hey, marketer, you work over here in a complete, great, we got a thing for that. Salesforce is kind of appearing on the other side of the battle line of saying, no, you work in Salesforce. Excuse me, please, you work in Salesforce. Ergo, you should have Einstein, and the right Einstein that's right sized, like it's a collection of models, and the LLMs can be anywhere. And like we have right sized the tubing and all the sausage making so that because you work in Salesforce, you're going to get the right AI, the right intelligence, the right answer where you work in Salesforce. So it's like it's two almost identical talk, like the words are the same. The destinations are completely different, right? And it's going to be fascinating to see which one goes out and like arm wrestles. Like, is it going to be AI or is it going to be like Clippy 2.0? Because that's what I'm just going to call it. I'm sorry, Microsoft. I love you guys, but I'm calling it Clippy 2.0. So like Clippy versus Einstein, we're just going to battle, and I can't wait.
But it's quite interesting because where we are, like, how integrated you have to be, how good your data has to be in Salesforce to maximize all the use out of this. And a lot of the conversations that are slowing down the adoption of this technology is my data stack ready for automation? Is my data in the right format? Is it in all the right boxes? The difference with Copilot, which I have, is that it comes with you into the environment with whatever data you've got, right? And it says, it's probably good enough, let's see what we can do with it, versus dealing with, is my CRM correctly updated? Did the people, you've done CRM audits. Have you taken the 20,000 records of customers that we have and correctly reduced it to 15,000? Or are you still dealing with those 5,000 records as if they're active customers and partners that still exist, right? And Salesforce, if we're going fully intelligent, is going to give you maybe some harsh looks on that data, but if you haven't done it properly. So there's that big, like, do I restructure my entire CRM now to be ready for Einstein? And maybe they can help you get there. But a lot of companies are going to be much more comfortable with Copilot for the next 3 to 5 years because it's just going to help them a little bit. It's safe.
Well, the question then becomes the little AI versus the big AI, right?
And I think the little AI will win a lot more.
The little AI in the short term is going to learn a lot more because so many customers, 1 in 4 Salesforce customers don't believe their data is ready for AI, whether it's little or big.
But don't you think it's funny that the first thing the Copilot does is integrate with Salesforce? Right, like it was the first thing Microsoft did was make sure that it was like Dynamics, Salesforce, woo.
Either Teams is integrated with you or you're integrated with Teams. It's that's just how it's going now, right? You're not.
The thing that's interesting about the Einstein Copilot announcement, though, is they purposely talk about a data cloud. They use that name, right? And that trying to give some seed of comfort and security around this being contextual information that comes from your business. This is built on data cloud. Right? So you're going to get the benefits of the way that's framed, as opposed to it being, like you say, and what we're talking about here is trying to distill this data from so many lots of sources beyond your CRM application as well. So I think that's kind of on the right path, but I think it's not, to everyone's point here, that's still not really solid. There's a much bigger problem when it comes to the data. Absolutely.
Did anyone else notice like a lot of the screenshots that they showed? Because I think this was really important. And I think it goes back to Rebecca's earlier point about where Salesforce is now posturing the human at the helm. I love that phrasing, Rebecca, is that even the like, hey, this is how this autonomous chat can go. It was like complex conversation. I like, the customer doing what the customer does. I want this, zagging to I want that, zigging over here to I want this. And at the very end, when the customer says, yeah, but I really think that I want to change the shipping date, it's the autonomous agent, right, that says, let me get you on the phone with a live agent. They're going to sort all this out. And then it routes to a live agent, like that in this autonomous action and in this autonomous routing that this whole process is able to do. It still puts the customer in the driver's seat, and it allows that autonomous agent to realize this is the complexity line that is now the line too far. Like, this is the step too far. I'm not going to be able to address this easily. Now I go off to the human. And I think that's the step. Had they not had that step, I'd have been like, woo, like red flags all over the place. But that's the step. That's the route that we put the human back, that really talented agent who can get on the line, can type those keys, and can solve that problem in 3 messages. That's how you get there. And that agent, because it's that connected platform, right, can see all of that, sees all of that interaction, and knows exactly, because also remember, yes, there's this autonomous agent that engages with the customer. There's also a full Einstein agent that's going to engage with the agent, right? So you're seeing both ends of where AI is actually going to help this process. So I thought that was a really important kind of flow to show that it landed with a person.
And that it landed with a person with all the data. And that it landed with a person with all the data and information of all of those interactions that happened with the autonomous one. Yeah.
The thing that I find interesting about this, though, is if we follow this through to a natural conclusion where you've reduced your agent base, you've brought in a lot more automation. So then you release a new product, say you're releasing a new laptop or something, and it has a serious problem with it, right, that requires an agent to deal with. Now, under the previous system, when I had 20% automation, 80% agents, I could get all those agents dealing with that one problem. If we have an issue that comes out with a complex product that can't be handled by the automated system, then suddenly you're looking at, I need to get 60% agent capacity on the phone.
Human load balancing will become a problem.
Exactly.
Let's be very honest about what's actually happening there, though, because I think it's a moment of sanity as opposed to some of the headlines and what everyone's been projecting. I think that we all projected and and so we ended up in a lot of conversations about we can eliminate our agent workload. And, I think we all understood, like all of us on this line were like, don't do this, like, do not do this. This is a dumb idea. And the more and more I'm talking to ops people who oversee contact center, HR people who oversee kind of the totality of where talent needs to be deployed, it was an artifice to be able to take the lowest performers off the playing field, absolutely, but it did not eliminate huge workflows, because already within this last year, what we've actually been seeing is an increase in automated processes and a lengthening of calls. Okay, so those are 2 data points that weren't supposed to happen. We were supposed to see no calls, remember? Because we got rid of all of our agents and we were doing all these automations and people weren't going to need to be on the phone. What has happened is the things that used to be wasting our agents' time have now been taken off the playing field, right? Password reset, simple redo, where's my stuff? That's being handled by the autonomous agent. And now the phone calls that our agents are handling are those new complex questions. It's the things that we've been spending millions of dollars training. So now all of a sudden, all those training dollars, all those WEM and WFN solutions we've been implementing for the past year, that's where we have to really start focusing and tracking our value, right? Because we're starting to see, yes, fewer calls, but longer calls about more complex issues. And agents, you're seeing agent satisfaction also increase. So it's this anomalous data set about the reality of work that's actually showing people really like being good at their jobs. If we give them the opportunity to be great at their jobs, they will rise to that occasion. I think that we're going to have to go through Right. We have to go through a little bit of titrating around what those metrics are going to be and what the timing of all that's going to be. But I think anyone who went out and fired all of their agents because they thought AI was going to save us, they kind of deserve to be jettisoned out of the pod bay doors. I'm just like, no offense, but like, Hal's going to take care of you now for all of us.
I'm just going to take us away from the conversation about agent experience, because I feel like we're very much going to go down another avenue there. But it is an interesting conversation. We still have contact centers measuring agents on handling times and occupancy rates. So it is how contact centers can meet this trend of technology is going to be interesting. But let's maybe now focus on a pure play contact center vendor. And one interesting story that I saw come up recently were the rumors that an activist investor, Anson Funds, wants Five9 to sell up. Now, Reuters broke this story, highlighting how Five9 stock had dropped, I think, 45% since the start of the year, yet its revenue growth still seems pretty strong, still double-digit each quarter. So it's a bit of an interesting one. I don't know. I'll hand this over to Mr. CCaaS, Simon. I don't know what your thoughts are on this.
I mean, it's an interesting thing when an activist decides to. I mean, let's talk about Jeff Lawson at Twilio. I mean, he may still be in place if it wasn't for Anson being so vocal about their discontent with the performance of the company. And what's interesting though is if you look at the stock since he left, it's dropped somewhat significantly. So it's kind of when it comes to the potential of Five9, I think you're absolutely right. They are doing very well when it comes to growth, and they are doing a very strong performance. I'm genuinely curious myself as to what's driving the thinking. I think I've got lots of financial AR analyst kind of friends. I was chatting to one of those recently, and he said when neither side is looking to comment, it's usually because something's happening that addresses what they might comment about, which kind of got me thinking. So yeah, it's very, very, I would argue, important to try and figure out what might be going on there. It could be just as overarching as Microsoft and Zoom are a significant force in the market, and perhaps if we crudely describe their ability to just go after seats, they go for freemium and they just grow, that will put a dent in, and going to be putting a dent in the likes of Five9 and other pure play CCaaS providers' ability to drive growth. It may be something just as fundamental as that, but I'm not sure. I don't know. I'm really genuinely keen to get under the hood on this one. It's fascinating, isn't it? And I'll circle back again to the fact that I think when there isn't any comment, because activists like to be pretty vocal, they like to say what they're doing and shout about it, and we did this and we did that, and it's all because of us that the company's now changed, and it was all because we're so brilliant. It does make me think that perhaps what it is that caused that is already what is already being addressed. I just don't know what that would be though.
Five9's been for sale for, they've had a ticket out on them for a while. I think it's kind of, if this was a secret, it was like the worst kept industry secret and like all of industry secrets. I mean, ever since the proposed Zoom acquisition, people have been wondering who was going to buy Five9, right? Like it's a common question. I think the interesting thing, and Simon, you bring up a really great point, which is, activist investors love to talk about being activist investors. But the thing about these folks, and the thing that is become a fairly significant pattern, is they throw out the first lob, right? Like they throw out that first stone. Look what happened with Salesforce of, hey, you're broken, you're busted. We're going to come in and we're going to change everything. How dare you do this? You can do that with a company the size of Salesforce. With a company the size of Five9, the lob you can throw is you've got to get bought. Like you are going nowhere. You've got to get bought. It happened with Slack. It happened, when folks were saying, oh, something's got to happen here. So I think that this was a fairly traditional activist investor first lob. As I look at Five9 in, let's say, the last 6 months, while they have continued on their innovation pathway, as they've continued down the path of really trying to perfect what it is cloud and what it is CCaaS really means for their customers and for a lot of the on-prem buyers that are still looking for a home or have been experimenting with other solutions, and that 2 to 3 year experiment is now over, and they might be looking to open another sandbox. Like, we've got a lot of different customers out there looking for where they want to invest next. I think that Five9's vision and mission statement of who they want to be in the next incarnation of Five9, where are they going to land? What are they going to be? How are they going to change the world? I think that that is likely what the activist investors are saying. Hey, like, focus in on this, keep that revenue growth going. Because for the vast majority of these activist investors, they want to make sure that your margin is nice and big. And one of the ways they tend to do that is trying to make you cut costs and make you focus and make you bring in that kind of operational rigor. We saw that happen at Salesforce. I get the sense from a lot of folks who have been talking about this news that that is certainly one direction, but that the other direction is, okay, where does that top line of growth keep coming from? Because it's not going to keep coming from a conversation of you've got to move to the cloud. It's going to have to come from someplace else, and it's going to have to come from another vision. So what is that vision? And that vision can't be, and I think all of us on this call, and Finbar, I'm just going to include you in the group here with this one, is saying, if you run around saying that the contact center is CX and CX is the contact center, that is limiting, and that is not where you want to stay, right? You have to broaden the aperture of what CX actually is. I mean, Simon, you and I have had this conversation together for what feels like a decade now, right? Is if you limit the definition of what customer experience and what CX is, that's the limited playing field you're going to be in. The question I think a lot of active investors should be asking, right? The question for Five9 is, okay, well, are you really going to play the game that your language says you're going to play? Or is this landing in a confusing next sales cycle? So I think it really comes down to focus. I think the team has the capacity to do exactly that. And I do believe that the team that they've got in place right now is the team that can bring a lot of that rigor and bring a lot of that focus. I think the question is going to be is how quickly. And does that have to come through acquisition, or can that happen through the growth pattern and through that growth trajectory that Mike Birkeland and everyone else at Five9 has already kind of mapped out?
And to Liz's point too, I think, that sort of initial CCaaS experiment that everybody went through of a couple of years, there are a whole bunch of those that are going to be flipping right now. And some of them are Five9, right? So as we think about that next step, as CCaaS becomes more commoditized, who decides they're an infrastructure player versus who has that higher level CX message and the important pieces of the puzzle to kind of pull together?
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to activists, obviously, they're very clearly, they are. The interesting thing is they'll find they'll look for the juice to pull on a particular thread, right? So whether it's improve earnings, perhaps cash flow, reduce debt, whatever it is, and they'll force companies to do unnatural things even. But what I find notable is that there's usually a clear ambition to just kind of goose the stock to get some kind of short-term gain, and we've seen some change in the stock recently with Five9, but it can often leave that company weaker after they do whatever it is they do. So I'm really hoping this is all for the right reasons, and perhaps reflecting on the importance of the way that, to Rebecca's point, the way the CCaaS market needs to evolve. It just needs to change. When we was at Enterprise Connect and everyone was on stage saying we've moved beyond CCaaS now, everyone was sat on stage saying we've moved beyond it, and we're all in agreement that it needs to be more of a broader company solving solution. And we've talked about data an awful lot. When it comes to realizing the benefits of an application like a CCaaS application to solve CX problems, it is a data problem, as we all know. You need to be thinking about how well you integrate with a CDP or a well-stocked CRM application or multiple CRM applications, whatever you're using for data. And so it's kind of good to see the push, and it's good. I think it's good for the momentum of the market and what should happen with the technology. But I am genuinely keen to I almost want to know that, it's all been sorted under the hood, and this is going to sort of go away. Everyone's going to be, we got a bit of a boost in stock and it's all good. That would be a good outcome.
Awesome, excellent. Well, I think there's lots of great stuff there on the future of the CCaaS market. And let's maybe focus on another of Five9's CCaaS competitors, Talkdesk. And now some news emerged around one of its customers being sued, not Talkdesk directly, but one of its customers being sued for its use of contact center AI. Liz, I don't know if you maybe want to talk a little bit about kind of what that lawsuit maybe would include and the permutations of it.
It's so uncomfortable. I'm just gonna say it right off the top of the bat. So the lawsuit really centers around California's privacy laws, and in the lawsuit, it is stated that Talkdesk actually routes all customer data and all of their kind of business partner communications through their own servers in real time, right? So this goes back to how both California data privacy and protection laws, as well as the larger GDPR laws, to be very honest and transparent here, require data to have residency, require data to have lineage, and to have transparency in where that data is going and how that data is being utilized. The reality here is that there are a lot of questions when it comes to how conversation data and how customer data is being routed. Is it being stored? Does the organization that purports to be utilizing this data truly have ownership, control, and the ability to say that individual's voice, that individual's data should not be included in this larger kind of, pod of data that's being used? And it is, and they do state in the lawsuit that Talkdesk, very specifically, is routing all of this data and then using all of this data to train its AI, and that customers are not made aware of that upfront because they believe they are doing business with this brand. And so there are a lot of questions that this begins to raise. But I'm going to be super honest about something. We've been raising these questions, and I will say this because Rebecca and I have sat in rooms together where we have sat at desks together, sitting right next to each other, where we have both repeatedly pushed on vendors in this space saying, what do you mean it's your data? What do you mean you trained the AI on your data? Because that's actually the customer's data. And it's more importantly to that, it's not just your customer's data, it's your customer's customer data. So explain to me again how it's your data just because it went onto your system. And the two of us, I can remember very specific vendor analyst sessions where, because Rebecca and I tend to flock together in that.
And the vendor says, oh, but our customer opted in.
Oh, but it's our data. Right. Our customer opted in. And what's the zinger question to that? 100% of the time, but did your customer's customer? Because in the state of California and in countries like Germany and anywhere else that's covered by GDPR, guess what the most important question is? It's not about your customer answering that question. It's about, does your customer's customer have the capacity and the right to say no? And for a lot of these vendors, this lawsuit should be a ginormous wake-up call that the arrogance of zero-party data, got to start looking at that. You want to start thinking to yourself, oh, well, someone just filled out a form and then hit submit, and because that form was on my server, I'm just going to use that data to train my AI. That's not how it works. I understand that's been the theoretical loophole, but that is not how it works. And this lawsuit, if it does anything, has to strip away some of that arrogance. It has to strip away some of this idea that I'm going to just go ahead and train my AI on this because no one has told me not to, right? And then no one has caught me as of yet. So I'm going to call it mine because no one has called it theirs. And so I think that this is a big wake-up call. I think that the reality is that the brand that it happened to and the brand that's at the center of this is also a brand that is notorious for wanting to make sure that they are doing right in the world. So I can't imagine that the brand involved, which is Patagonia, it's out there in the ecosystem, we can say it. Patagonia is a brand that is vehemently opposed to things that they feel do wrong. They will literally sew messages on their tags that prove how they want to create a positive impact in the world. And so I think that, everything that I'm hearing from folks that I know there is that this was a big, like, whoa. We didn't, like, whoa. We weren't quite like we thought that this was indemnified. We thought, like, there is a lot of, like, we didn't know what we didn't know. So this is going to be a big wake up call, but it is time for everyone to look at what their practices are. Like, we've been looking at what the models are, and we've been looking at what the outputs are of what AI is doing. This is the wake up call to actually start and asking your vendors, define who owns the data. Where'd you get this? Like literally, when you say it's your data, how?
Saying this call is being recorded is not enough.
Yeah, I think that's like being in the proud European camp. I know not everyone on this call is. I don't want to say I'm happy to see this lawsuit, but in general, this sort of lawsuit is exactly the sort of thing I want to be seeing, because we have this big debate going on in Europe being like, how much do you have to tell your customers? Do you have to fully disclose that they interacting with AI, their data is being used with AI? And I think the answer will eventually, in Europe at least, be yes, and give them a way to say no. But until it's tested repeatedly by these kind of things, there's no background there. We need the precedent established of where regulators are going to start drawing the line, and then companies will start to fall in order. So I'm actually excited to see these kind of things, because, living in the sort of the continent I do, we want strict protections on how our data are being used. We want to know when the big machine is coming in and dictating, because we don't trust any of the algorithms. And it's not being paranoid. It is a cultural norm, thankfully, I would say.
But I want to know what CCaaS vendor is not marketing the value of their AI, saying they use conversational information to train their AI models.
And every single one of them has to wonder how many of their customers are going to get sued. Because let's be very honest here. Talkdesk didn't get sued. Their customer did. So what's the value of that? What's the cost of that? Like, that's where it's going to hurt.
But the good thing is that if the customer's being sued, then it happens faster, because they're going to change provider, right? I mean, yeah.
I think it's hard for Patagonia to plead ignorance when we know that's how they would have done. The demonstrable value of the artificial intelligence would have been, we use these interactions with your customers to train these models so that they get better and they do a better job. That would have been very clearly part of the sales and marketing pitch to whoever bought this from Talkdesk.
I think the place where the lack of clarity comes in is that they don't know if they're doing the right or the wrong thing, because the government hasn't told them explicitly, is it okay for me, if I get consent from my customers in terms of service, even if my customers don't understand what they're agreeing to, and then I give that consent to my provider, I'm safe. And the regulators need to decide you are or you aren't. And I think we're kind of seeing that maybe you're not.
Yeah, but there's precedent to this. And I think we have to go back and look at that, because it's not specific to AI, but it is specific to data, and it is specific to a brand getting sued because of a software's fuzziness. And that's the Hannah Anderson lawsuit, where Hannah Anderson got sued for breaches and issues around data privacy and data handling by Salesforce, right? So this is not a new motion. This is definitely a motion that has happened in California and around California legislation before. The reality here is the California laws around data privacy are exceedingly specific. They have been tested and redone. This is the second iteration of this California Privacy Act. So it is very, very specific. And what the lawsuit alleges is that Patagonia, because of not disclaiming, of not understanding exactly how and not demonstrating exactly how Talkdesk was going to use their customers' opted in data to train Talkdesk's models, not Patagonia's models, but Talkdesk models, and that customers did not agree to that. They agreed to this. So this isn't about like a RAG technique that came in and trained the model to be specific around Patagonia's data. This is very much about, hey, Patagonia, not only did you likely not know that this was happening, but if you did know what was happening, it had to be disclosed. And Talkdesk, where the heck was your responsibility in that? It is a very nuanced lawsuit. It's very, very specific, but what it's going to do isn't necessarily going to put the onus on the regulators to change what it is they want to do. It has to change the way brands and vendors work together to have that layer of transparency, because you can sit here all day long and tell me Einstein has 90 different models. At OpenAI, we have ethical AI. You can tell me all day long that that's part of the sales pitch, but this now puts a requirement on someone. And it might be Debbie and Bob down at risk and compliance. I don't know who it's going to be, but someone's going to have to go and have a very uncomfortable conversation with every single one of their vendors, to Simon's point, who has included this, but all of this anonymized data that was just sitting around and we just trained our models on it. Going to have to go ask those uncomfortable conversations. It puts the onus where, quite frankly, the onus should have always been, which is on the buyer and the seller to ask hard questions. But with AI, we've kind of just been like, glitter, ooh, buy, go, ha.
And I think we're going to see a lot more. I think we're going to see a lot more lawsuits like this. I think this is just the tip of the iceberg.
Sure. Yeah. Finbar's point, precedent is going to drive policy, and that's kind of like what we're going to do. Yeah.
And let's be honest, I suspect there's many going on right now. It's just what's in the news, right? But I do think that it's really important to get into the detail of what the implication of training the AI model is. The detail, the devil's in the detail, right? Well, how does that actually compromise you as a person, and what does that, how it affects you is important to be clear on as part of this. Because ultimately, if it just makes the algorithm work better, but there's no retention of anything, there's no capturing and because typically, as we know, there's usually a corpus of data used to train a model, but then that corpus is binned. It's not just continuously accessed. It improves the model's capability, and then that's it. So it'd be interesting to see how this unfolds.
And this is a double whammy. Also remember that this is the double whammy too, Simon, right? This isn't just about data and how data is being handled. This is about how calls are being recorded and intercepted, which in California is a big no-no, right? Like that is Zoom has to say like your call is being recorded. Like we always joke, like in the great state of California, every single person on this call has to acknowledge that they are being recorded, and that is okay with them as an individual, because there have been multiple lawsuits. There have been multiple instances where people were accidentally recorded, so it's also about the recording. And this also, so not only is there the data precedent around Hannah Anderson and Salesforce, there's also a call recording precedent around Verint. Remember, it was a couple years ago, I want to say maybe even like a year, like it's been fairly recently, with a credit union. And it's not popping in my head immediately, so I apologize, Charlie, but a credit union was sued because of the calls being diverted. So in California, you do not record calls without everyone knowing about it, right? And it's not, and to Rebecca's earlier point, you don't just get to say this call is being recorded, because in California, you also then have to say it's being rerouted, it's being held at a different time. Who's putting that in their IVR? Like, who's putting that? No one.
Awesome. There's lots of really great points there, but I see we've hit the top of the hour, and I'm sure we've all got calls that we need to bounce on. But I appreciate all of you for joining me today. A really great conversation around four quite hard-hitting topics in the customer experience space. So yeah, thanks to all our analysts for joining me and for you for watching.